By the time the divers reached the bottom of the ocean, they were expecting to find a body. The ship had been down there for days, there was no light, there was no power, no air supply. Nothing about that place suggested that anybody could still be alive. It's midnight somewhere, and tonight I have a story for you. Harrison Okene worked as a cook on a small tugboat off the coast of Nigeria. It wasn't a dramatic job, just long hours and routine work, the kind of place that you get used to once you've been around it for long enough. On the morning that the ship went down, nothing at all felt urgent. The water wasn't wild, the weather wasn't violent, the vessel was just carrying out its normal operations when something went wrong beneath the surface. The boat started to take on water, not all at once, not in a dramatic way, just enough that the balance of the ship began to shift. Harrison was inside when it all started to happen. The floor began to tilt, the walls leaned a little, then the entire ship rolled, and in seconds the world that Harrison was standing in turned completely upside down. And as the vessel capsized, Harrison was thrown into the water inside the ship. The space that he'd been working in flooded almost instantly. Darkness swallowed up everything. He didn't know which way was up or which way was down. He didn't know where the exits were. The ship wasn't sinking neatly, it was turning over and over. Rooms became ceilings, doorways became floors. And in the chaos, Harrison moved the only way that his body knew how, toward what he felt like was open space. He surfaced inside a pocket of trapped air, not because he planned it at all, not because he knew where it was, he just happened to end up in the only part of the wreck that hadn't completely filled with the water. Now the air pocket itself was very small. There was just enough space above the waterline for Harrison to be able to breathe. The rest of the room was completely submerged. The ship lay on its side at the bottom of the ocean. There was no light, there was no sound, no sense of time. Harrison was alive, but he was locked inside a place no human being was ever meant to survive. The water around him was freezing cold, the air was damp and thinning, he had no food, he had no fresh water, he was all alone in a ship at the bottom of a sea. Now at first he started calling out and then he stopped. He realised very quickly that there was no one going to hear him. He also knew that the air in his pocket that he was surviving in wasn't going to last forever. Above him, the ocean pressed down on the hull. The ship itself wasn't moving, it wasn't shifting, it was completely settled, and so was Harrison's situation. Time passed in a way that Harrison couldn't measure. The darkness made minutes feel like hours and hours feel like days, all at the same time. He stayed close to the air pocket, careful not to move too much because every movement disturbed the water and every disturbance made him aware of how small the space he was surviving in really was. And at some point the realization set in for Harrison that there was no rescue sounds, there were no engines that he could hear or no vibrations from above. From where he was, it felt like the world had completely moved on. The ship had gone down and Harrison had gone down with it. Unbeknown to Harrison, days later, a commercial dive team was actually dispatched to inspect the wreck. And their job wasn't to rescue anybody, it was to recover the bodies. The divers themselves moved slowly through the flooded compartments, their lights cutting narrow beams through the dark black water, and inside one section of the ship, they noticed something that didn't make any sense. A hand rising out of the darkness. One of the divers froze and then he reached his hand out and the hand grabbed back. And against everything that they expected, Harrison Okene was still alive. The divers secured him and they began the slow process of bringing him out. Every movement had to be controlled. The pressure, the depth, the condition of his body after days in the cold water. And when Harrison finally reached the surface, the world he came back to felt completely unreal. The light, the air, the beautiful sounds. The place he'd been wasn't meant to let anyone return from it, but somehow he did. Harrison didn't go looking for danger. He was just in the wrong place when the ship rolled over. A single moment and a space that nobody was meant to survive. Until next time, I'll see you at midnight.